There's death, there's destruction.
Global news impacts us.
We have to change the way we live. This is why we need independent media.
Cheers and salutations. Welcome to another episode of Hard Lens Media. We, as always, are a platform to bring in individuals who don't back down to the establishment, speak truth to power. And I'm very proud to introduce, this is a first time on our show. You saw him on the Jimmy Dore show, as well as numerous other independent media networks. He has been somebody who's been calling out the establishment and has done excellent commentary in regards to the military industrial complex. Of course, the big social media censorship wave that we've all been feeling firsthand on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and right here on YouTube as well. I am proud to introduce Garland Nixon. Thank you so much. First time on our show. For our viewers and subscribers, if they don't know who you are, can you give us a brief background into your work history and what you've done? And I know you're also going to be a speaker for the Rage Against the War Machine. So first time ever, round of applause for Garland Nixon. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. Oh, I guess I got a kind of a weird and interesting background. I was in law enforcement for over 20 years. I retired. I was actually a very high-ranking law enforcement official in the state of Maryland. I was a major and worked for the governor's office, all that kind of stuff. Was involved with the American Civil Liberties Union for years. I actually received an award for them for my work on police accountability, which was something that I felt was very important. When I left the board about a year and a half ago, I was on the National Board of Directors for the American Civil Liberties Union. Been doing radio since about 2000. I started working on a conservative radio show in Baltimore. I'm, of course, being far left, so kind of, being a foil or arguing with them a bit. Then actually I went to a little radio station. I'm going to give you the 1 minute version. I went to Pacifica Radio in Washington, D.C. 2006. Oddly enough, some kind of way I ended up on Fox News from like 2010 to about 2000. I left really just before the whole COVID thing. I was on all the national Fox News shows, and ended up doing a local show in Washington, New Jersey, etc. for Fox News show. And now I'm all over the place. Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. I do a show. I have a Pacifica show in Washington, D.C., WPFW, and on a KPFK in Los Angeles, California. I have a Pacifica show. Then I have my YouTube and Rockfin show. So I'm all over running my mouth. I'm a hardcore lefty, an anti-war, anti-imperialist guy, and that's who I am. One more interesting thing, I guess, about me, my background, my political mentor for years was Paul Robeson Jr., the son of Paul Robeson. Met him years ago. He and I became best of friends, and he was my political mentor.
All right. Well, first of all, I guess in this day and age of where everyone has to be either on Team Red or Team Blue, how dare you go on conservative networks and talk to people who have a different perspective and point of view? How dare you? But all seriously, though, let's actually talk about that, because right now we're living in very confusing times. I'm not going to call them interesting times. We're supposed to be in one side or the other, Team Red or Team Blue, vote Democrat, vote Republican, watch Fox News, watch MSNBC, enjoy the partisan divide that's the neoliberal establishment put between us. But for you, as someone who's built a career in radio, television, and going on the internet, and obviously speaking on various news programs and media outlets, what is the significance of perhaps speaking to people of a different perspective? Because the narrative that's given to us by MSNBC, CNN, and yes, Fox News as well, is that you can't go outside your safe space. You don't know who these people are. They vote the other side, or they might not see you. They are the enemy. Why bother to reach out to another side of the audience? What is the gain to speak to another person?
Well, I think you have to kind of look at politics in America from a broader perspective. One of the things I noticed at Fox, and of course it's the same thing at MSNBC, CNN, wherever, is the game. And the game it's the Overton window game. It's to create a discussion wherein the so-called left will be defined as the Democratic Party and their talking points, and the right will be defined as the Republican Party as their talking points, and they have people talk within the confines of that Overton window, and therefore they are in complete control of the conversation and the construct, because that's what the mainstream wants. I think what we have to understand is that the the issue of ideology has been redefined in the United States so that what people call left has nothing to do with left. As I'm sure you know, traditional left looks at politics through the context of economic class, working class people, the ruling elite, the wealthy, blah, blah, blah. That's the look. It's been redefined in America so that people will say, well, that left, the LGBTQ or something culturally related. That's how the left is redefined. So we can have a Joe Biden, a guy who opposes everything. I'm a person in charge, in favor of organized labor, in favor of, the working class stuff, a strong social safety net. So a guy like Joe Biden, who opposes all the things that the traditional left is in favor of because of some cultural issues as they redefine them, they can now call him the left, and they can redefine people like me who have an economic view or an economic class view. They can redefine us right out of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that in regards towards how everything played out with the aftermath of 2016, or at least the beginning of it. Perhaps it's not perhaps, it's always been there in regards towards who can speak to who's going to be part of the club. But I think 2016 was I guess, the beginning of what we're in right now. And that is, you cannot speak to the other side. With the ascension of Trump's presidency from 2016 to 2020, everyone lost their ability to think critically. And now we're seeing firsthand, rarely, and look, I will never go to bat for the GOP, but occasionally when you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene calling out the fact that how come we're giving so much money to Ukraine, billions of dollars, but yet, the American people aren't getting anything in return. While I disagree with her on all of her policy issues, she is asking a very significant question, whereas we see the Democratic Party say more votes, more bills for more spending. And it's, at least from my perspective, the longer this war continues on, it's going to escalate into something far more dangerous, which I dread. And I hope that peace does eventually someday arrive through diplomacy. But we're seeing that now, and we're also seeing firsthand those who were leftists or progressives or liberals are now beating the drums of war while looking past the fact that we're looking at our own annihilation should things heat up even further. I mean, diplomacy should have happened as soon as the first shot was fired. And this is, again, the whole other conflict was happening in Ukraine is a whole other story altogether. But we're seeing, at least in the political spectrum here, Team Blue, the liberals, the Democrats are all shouting for more endless war. And I'm not expecting the GOP to be any different. But when you hear some of their members call that out, it's happening. I want to get your perspective on that. Has it always been this way, or is this just a new recent development that we're seeing? Because it's a rather shock for me, because I remember early on many Democrats, or at least supposedly put on the face of being anti-war. Your thoughts?
Well, you bring up something very important, and that is the year 2016. I think it's a critical pivotal point to look at. A couple of things happened in 2016, or at least came to the forefront. Number one, after many years of neoliberalism and the pain of neoliberalism, and of course 2008 hits, and Barack Obama comes in, and they tell us they're going to fix it. And we're told by 2016, what we are told is that we've had a recovery, but people, the human beings, weren't getting anything from it, and they intuitively knew that they weren't getting a recovery, and there was something wrong with the system. Along comes Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Well, we can have plenty of criticism for both of them, but here's the bottom line. Bernie Sanders comes in and he starts talking about politics from the perspective of economic class, and man, that caught on like wildfire. Donald Trump comes in and he starts saying things like, well, perhaps NATO, is outdated. He starts questioning some foreign policy things. He starts questioning some things that were considered, sacred by the military industrial complex and by the imperialists, the ruling elite class, and that there were threats to them to this ruling elite that they had not seen in the past. Meanwhile, externally, they were so focused on, the Middle East. That's where all the oil is, and they can just bomb whatever they want. They can use Afghanistan for an ATM, and they can launder, automatic teller machine. They can launder money through that. Everything's working fine. And they look and they realize that Russia and China are rising powers. And so they look outside and like, holy moly, our hegemonic grip on the world is now being challenged. They look internally and they say, oh no, our control of the conversation is now being challenged. And so what I think one of the things that happened was they always maintained the illusion of democracy. Yeah, the people kind of knew they put a bullet in the head of one of our presidents, but people kind of brushed it off and thought there was a democracy. 2016, the way things went down with Bernie, et cetera, a lot of people in America started getting the feeling, hey, there's something wrong here. Perhaps we're not in a democracy after all. And perhaps the ruling elite class can no longer afford that illusion of democracy. So they started casting aside the illusion of democracy in the United States because the threat they felt was just too big from a Bernie Sanders or a Donald Trump. And they were doing the things that they did to try to mitigate those threats. Externally, they said, we've got to redirect our focus and attention from Afghanistan and the money laundering that we've made through the war on terror to try to confront, as it were, Russia and China, so we can tamp down these other superpowers that are trying to catch up with us enough that they can be competitive throughout the world. And so this imperialist machine became afraid. They were afraid of internal uprising, internal pushback, external powers. They became desperate. And I think that's why you hit the nail on the head when you said the year 2016. That's when things really started to take a turn.
Yeah. And again, look, I think the problem was 2016, or not the problem, but the situation that arose was the aftermath of the Obama-Biden presidency. And that is, many Americans were still struggling. And I'm going to quote Jimmy Dore on this one, but you think people voted for Donald Trump because their lives are doing great? When you have somebody like that come along and say, I'm going to solve all your problems, here's what's going on. And controversial statement, I said this before on the show and on other people's shows, Donald Trump was a very transparent president. No, he wasn't honest, but he told us just how screwed and rigged the system is. He told the American people the system is rigged. How do I know? Because I've used it. And then during I believe the first Republican primary debate, when money in politics was brought up, Trump said to the American people, and it flew over everyone's head, I give these people money, being the politicians, I give these people money and they do what I say. And then when the moderator asked how many of you got money from Trump, most of the Republican candidates in the 2016 primary raised their hands. And what everyone needs to remember is Trump saying those words, we have to remember that he used to be a Democrat. And, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a senator who was a Democrat in New York State, and she was running for president as well during the 2016 election cycle. Trump used to be a Democrat. Both of them that's right, Hillary Clinton. I'm being sarcastic here. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton went to Trump's wedding. Bill Clinton and Trump have been very close to each other. They're also close with a very notorious scumbag, and I have to be careful saying his name because YouTube likes to censor, but they knew him. And so it's all one big club, and I think a lot of people didn't understand just how connected everything was. But the situation with Trump and Bernie is that they were able to resonate with people and agree with their messages, and perhaps maybe both of them weren't able to realize that so many millions of Americans were going to latch on to what they were saying. The one thing I want to ask you then is, the establishment's been doing everything it can to suppress and silence the universal rage that I think a lot of Americans feel, and that is, we've been abandoned, we're being screwed over, homeowners are losing everything, small businesses are being shut down, we have a crumbling infrastructure, we don't have Medicare for all, we have a thing called medical bankruptcy, we also have this growing crisis of student debt. Is there a chance for people to actually wake up? Because I know right now there's the rage against the war machine where you have libertarians, the People's Party, groups for Assange, and so many others speaking out. Is there a chance for that momentum to rise up? Because there seems to be this huge wall and a suppression movement that's taking place on social media to silence what we saw in 2016 and the aftermath of it. I want to give the floor to you.
I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable in the same way that, we were told that neoliberalism was great. It's the greatest ideology. It's going to work for everyone. In 2008 hit and it all fell apart. And Donald Trump was, as you said, people looked at what was happening and they realized, wait a minute, we're being told that things are better, but we don't feel it. And they acted and they reacted. Now, for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The machine got frightened, and the national security state and the media, they're pushing back. But there is a reality that people are feeling. So right now, interestingly enough, what are you hearing everywhere? Eggs. Eggs, eggs, eggs. That's what we're hearing about. We're hearing people say, man, have you seen the price of eggs? For God's sake, $1 an egg, 50 cents an egg. Those are realities that people feel on a day-to-day basis. And you can come up with all of the, the media hype you want to, and all of the propaganda you want to. People still have to go to the store and buy eggs, and people are going to feel pain. And people realized in 2016, for all as great as they told us Obama was, and as fantastic a job as we were told that he was doing, people still realize, I don't have any money in the bank. My job is insecure. It doesn't pay well. I don't have benefits. Holy moly, I got Obamacare and the price is going up and it's not what I thought it was. So reality is on people's back, and people are hearing propaganda, and the propaganda only works but so long. Look what happened with this Ukraine stuff. I've been doing radio. It started off where I'd say the stuff that I would say which was simply explaining the Ukraine conflict through a historical context. Here's what happened. Here's how it happened. Here's how we got here. And I was getting pushback. Oh, you're a Russian bot. Why should we listen to you? Blah, blah, blah. Now I'm getting, the callers are saying something totally different. You're right. LA, man, people call in and they know more about the doggone history of Ukraine than I do. So it was inevitable. And I think it is inevitable that people are going to wake up. People are beginning to wake up. The word's out. And here's the good thing. People like you, and I'll say people like you and me and Jimmy Dore, the alternative media exists. And people are sick of MSNBC, CIA, CNN, Fox, etc. And they're turning to people like us because what do you know? We're not making $30,000 a day. Most of us started for much of nothing and aren't making that much right now doing it. We do it as a labor of love, and we believe in what we're doing. And so you have now the mainstream media is bleeding, and people are coming to our types of shows because at least, they believe, at least whether we're right or wrong, they believe we're trying to get the facts straight. And I just see alternative media. And again, I watch your stuff. I think it's great. I think alternative media is playing a gigantic role in giving people information so that they can look at it independently and unbiased of the spin that they get from the mainstream media and make their own decisions. We're not trying to tell them what to think. We're giving them some information and they can do with it what they want.
Now, everything that you said, I agree with. You are correct. We need to have independent media. And, it pains me to say this, but unfortunately, there is a system that I think you're familiar with, and we here at Heartland's Media are very familiar with, and that is the ongoing censorship and suppression of independent media. And take, for example, before 2020, I already even know that the rules were very draconian at the time on YouTube. Well, not as much as they are now. But when it comes down for, doing the kind of content that you do, I do, Jimmy does, Convo Couch, Revolutionary Blackout Network, Slow News Day, everyone, I could list their names on and on and on. Whether you agree with different people who are progressive or libertarian, the problem is that there is an atmosphere, not atmosphere, there's a growing environment that's situationally got out of control, and that is more internet censorship. I mean, on Twitter, you lost your Twitter account because you made a sarcastic joke. Nothing that you tweeted out, and you spoke about this on the Jimmy Dore show. And I urge everyone to check out that interview that Garland did with Jimmy Dore when he was on the Jimmy Dore show about, you made a sarcastic joke. Nothing in it was based on fact or anything you wanted. So there we go. It's a sarcastic joke, but obviously people can't take jokes seriously. Or when we've received not one, but 7 strikes by YouTube for more or less, and I'm just going to be polite on this one, BS situations because the algorithm couldn't tell the difference that we were reporting factual stories, but yet we were going against quote unquote YouTube's guidelines. What are your thoughts on this environment of immediate censorship? And we're seeing it being led not only by Democrats, but yes, even Republican lawmakers, because let's face it, they're both the same. there's this need to silence anyone that speaks out against the neoliberal narrative. Can you at least speak for many of our audience who may not be familiar about the ongoing censorship that we're seeing from independent content creators, be they progressive, libertarians, independents, socialists, conservatives? If we are not on the mainstream narrative or algorithm, everything that we state is usually silenced. And you have said something very true, that people are looking for something different than the corporate media narrative, but there's the censorship that we have to deal with too. Can you take the floor, please?
Well, I think that one of the things, paradoxically, that has helped alternative platforms grow during COVID, there were a lot of people that were having conversations that absolutely, nothing was allowed. No conversations, no matter how benign, were allowed during COVID. And what happened? Rumble, Rockfin, Odyssey, these other alternative media channels started to grow. And I think that was a good thing. I think that it had a counterproductive, to some extent, it was a counterproductive effort, that as they tried to, shut the mouths of people, they would go to other platforms, and these other platforms would grow to a point where I think they're a little concerned right now. I think the people at YouTube would love to shut off, the Jimmy Dores and the Durans, et cetera. But I think they have a fear. And the fear is, if some of the big, Jimmy Dore's got 1 million, the Duran's got like 300,000, some of these big ones start to leave, that there will be a cascade effect. And that if they lose a couple of the big ones, boom, they'll lose them all. I mean, let's face it, you and I, if Jimmy Dore got canned and the Duran got canned and Russell Brand suddenly got canned, at that point, I'd say, well, I know I'm a goner. I might as well shut my channel down and see where they go. And I'm already on Rockfin, and I always say I'm on Rockfin because, and I'm getting to open in the Rumble channel because, as you don't know on any given day, they may shut us all down. But I think there is a fear that they may make a mistake. At least they have some hope that we can do some self-censorship or something, that we'll all leave and they'll lose total control of us. So I know what they're trying to do. I will say, I think something a little bit different. I do think a lot of people believe that there are algorithms, that a lot of things they do with algorithms. What I learned personally from the Twitter files is this: that wasn't algorithms. That was people looking at, saying, I don't like that guy, what he said. I don't like anybody who says this. Not an algorithm. The algorithm may say, anybody who says this, can them, shut them down. But there were people looking at, literally, the government was saying, here's something from Garland, get rid of him. Here's a tweet from some person who has 50 followers that we don't like, shut them down. So I think a lot of things that we put on algorithms, and let's face it, they were meeting with Twitter, they were meeting with Facebook, YouTube, all of them aren't algorithms. The machine is scared to death. The machine is looking at people like us, saying, man, they're exposing us. What are we going to do? How are we going to shut it down? So I tend to look at it in a different way. I think we got them on the ropes. I think we got them running scared, and we just got to keep doing what we're doing and keep pressing and not give up and do the things that we believe in. And, and I'm like this. Well, in the same way that the things that they did the last few years awakened some new platforms, then if they throw us all off tomorrow and we all go to other platforms, those platforms will grow exponentially. I'm not going to worry about it. We keep doing what we're doing. And if they want to push back, that's their problem. And it's going to come back to haunt them. I like the things that are happening right now with shows like yours and mine and Jimmy's and all kinds of shows. And as you said, even some shows with people that I might not agree with, let them say what they're going to say, and let the people decide whether what they're saying is factual or what I'm saying is factual.
The way I look at independent media is, here's the thing. We're here to speak out against the establishment. Obviously, it's quite clear, and this is not open for debate. Our politicians can be bought by anyone, not just Russia, but corporations. Any dark money can buy our elections. Our politicians legalize bribery thanks to the Supreme Court. That's the whole thing. Our politicians do insider trading, and the same people who control our politicians, Wall Street, big banks, special interest groups, hedge fund managers, the top 1%, same people who donate to the Democratic Party also control the Republican Party. But also those same institutions that bought our politicians also control the media. And that's what a lot of people need to realize. And so when I say the purpose for independent media is to, one, call out the fact that we are not getting information and our politicians are not being held accountable. And when we share this information, it's up to the viewers to make their own decision on what we're saying, on what we're stating, what we're sharing with them, what we're reporting on. I mean, we're seeing the outstanding work from Matt Taibbi, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, and so many others. Glenn Greenwald. I apologize if I'm missing anyone else, but let's face it, there is a hunger to actually get the news by the American people who've been lied to for a very long time. And the thing is, corporate media and the politicians, well, they're going to think for you, or at least that's what they want. And they assume everyone's just too stupid to think for themselves. So I go back to, again, a question that you already answered. How do we mobilize the American people? I'm talking about conservative voters, libertarians, Democrats, socialists, liberals. We all agree that there is something fundamentally wrong with the world we're living in, where we have endless money for war and bailouts for Wall Street and the big banks. But when the American people need a bailout, we're told to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. How do we get that when we've seen Bernie Sanders systematically try and quiet down and simmer down the very thing he created? Again, Chris Hedges called that out perfectly. You know, Bernie Sanders abandoned the movement purposely. But then also you have people like Trump, whereas, yeah, he could speak a populist message, but the only reason why he's running again in 2024 is, number one, ego, and two, to control the MAGA movement that he created. And he's losing his grasp on power. How do we get to the point to where we can actually get people mobilized out of the street and actually, dare I say it, maybe reform the system, uproot it, upend it? How do we get there again when there is a great wall of challenges, corporations, the two-party system, internet censorship? How do we get past that? How do we mobilize? I think that's something that a lot of people are very upset about and angry about. And how long do we have to wait?
Let me put it a little differently too. Then, rather than reform the system or change the system's crashing. So I think the question will be, as the system crashes, what will be there? When there's nothing but ashes, what will be there to arise? Because that's what we'd see a lot of times. Historically, you don't see people take down a system. You see a system fall apart. And then the next question is, what's sitting there after the system falls apart? Whether it's Nazi Germany, whatever the case may be, whether it's what happened when the Soviet Union fell, what was there to arise? So I think what we have to try to do and what we have to focus on is creating a practical system. It's practical politics. One of the things, this rage against the war machine is important. Why? And look, I'm a lefty. Of course, I don't agree with libertarians on economic issues, right? But practical politics is where we need to go, where people say, right now, what do we have? I call it a kakistocracy, where the most corrupt and the most inept, incompetent people in our society have risen to become its leaders. In a practical society, number one, the people who are in charge, you want to be democratically elected. And number two, you want competent people who intend to represent their constituency, right? That's practical politics. That's just the people who are there to try to accomplish something, right? Not these technocrats who want to, as you might have heard this before, neurotics build castles in the sky, psychotics live in them. And these people do both. They create a false narrative and they try to get all us to live or die within the context of their false narrative. Right now, here's a perfect example. I'm a lefty, but when I look at Europe, I look at Viktor Orban, he's a crazy man. He's a right winger. I may not agree with him ideologically, culturally, things of that nature. I may not, but here's what I have to say. I'd rather be there right now than I would be in, say, France. Why is that? Because Viktor Orban is at least being practical, saying, look, you know what? People got to eat. We got to have energy. We got to have food. We got to have the basic staples of life. Before we go to talk about politics, people have to have the basics, and we've got to deal with the basic needs of our society. That's practical politics, right, left, or in. You may not agree with all the details of how you get there or how you stay there. But if you agree that the goal is foundational needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If we start at the basement and say people need the basics, food and shelter and things of that nature, that has to be our priority, we can get somewhere from there. We can make our argument. And we believe in democracy. I can say we got 10 voters. I can say to those 10 voters, I'm a lefty, you should vote for me. And the libertarian can say the same, and the conservative can say the same. And you know what? One of us gets 5 votes, we're in charge. And now we got to have a coalition. Well, what do you know? We got to make deals with the others, and we can get somewhere that way. So I think the way I see it is, because the system is independently crashing of its own flaws, we don't need to fix or change this system or recreate it. We need to ensure that we have a practical solution available for it when it crashes of its own merit or lack thereof.
Now, one last thing I want to get to, and again, seriously, we are very happy to have you on the show. This is something that caught my attention, and you shared this with me as well. Look, maybe we are starting to see the cracks in the system. Maybe enough people are waking up. I would like to live in that world, because unfortunately, we live in a system where no one is challenging the two-party system. Those who we elected into office, be it a Democrat or Republican, to challenge the system, become part of it. Case in point, look what happened to Tea Party Republicans. Last I checked, I think Kevin McCarthy was a Tea Party Republican, only then to become part of the establishment, AOC and the squad, quote unquote progressives, but yet they're more than happy to give a word salad answer about why they wouldn't do anything to support force the vote. But again, we see people become part of it, but yet we do see things like this. And again, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on this, where you have a Kentucky Democrat. Again, everyone's different in different parts of the state. Kentucky is a red state, but you have a Kentucky Democrat there who's suggesting Biden be impeached for war crimes. And the U.S. has definitely put in a lot of money, whereas I think we should be advocating for diplomacy and peace talks right away, because, they have nukes, the Russians have nukes, we have nukes, and they start launching in the sky. It's mushroom clouds in the sky. And, I think the survivors will envy the dead. But that's just me. It's from Dr. Strangelove. But I think, the survivors will envy the dead. But, we have, again, this Democrat, Jeffrey M. Young, calling Biden a war criminal. And especially, let's face it, Biden was vice president with Barack Obama. We went from 2 wars to 7 under Obama, got rid of habeas corpus. Your thoughts on this? Is this maybe the beginning, or especially with what we're seeing with Rage Against the War Machine, is this the beginning of maybe a pushback? And I know I've asked this question already, but is this the beginning of maybe people waking up, or is this just a fool's dream?
I would put it differently. I don't think it's the beginning of people waking up. I think it's an indicator that more and more people are waking up, right? I see it indicative of something that you probably hear, and I see on Twitter what he's saying to those who are watching MSNBC or Fox all the time. For them, they'll look at it and go, "Oh, I can't believe somebody's saying that. Wow, that's something new." And for me on Twitter, I see this all day long amongst people. I see thousands of people. I do a YouTube show, and I see 1,200 people watching my YouTube show, and all of them say the same exact thing. So I think this is an indication that there are people rising up now saying, you know what, this is a reality. I am opposing this empire. I am opposing the brutality of the U.S. empire. I'm going to speak to the history of the brutality of what we've done, the reality of what we've done. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And that's what I love about this guy. He's not sugarcoating. He's saying, look what we've done to these countries. This is a reality. We are hypocrites and war criminals in this party. I think it's interesting, like somebody like me who left the party and completely gave up on it. That doesn't mean that I don't. Number one, I agree with this person 100%. So I think it is a wonderful thing that he's stepping into the party, that he's pushing up to him and saying, I will run as a Democrat and I'm going to make this statement. You guys are a bunch of stinking war criminals. And now we can see whether or not there are people in the Democratic Party who agree with him, and there are people in the Democratic Party who hear him. And of course, we can now see, look at the mainstream media. They're either going to ignore him, or if what he's saying starts catching on, they'll all have to attack him and be exposed. So I think it's rather than something new, I think it's an indicator. This is something that's going on. This is a sentiment that's out there, and that sentiment is starting to break through in the person of this guy, Jeffrey Young, who's saying, you know what, I'm going to call a spade a spade. I'm going to call these people what they are, and I'm going to run for office and see how that works. What will be interesting is, as his name gets out there, of course, he's a Russian bot or a Chinese, whatever, what they got to say, Iranian lover, Assad supporter, something, the usual imperialist garbage. But I do think that it will be interesting. I'll put it like this. If I see that this guy's raising money, I'm sending him $20. I'm sending. If I see that this guy some kind of way is like says, send me $20, I'm sending a guy $20. And I think there'll be millions of people out here who will say, you know what, I'm sending this guy $5, $20, $2, whatever I can send him because I like what he has to say. And that's something I think that's going to be very good. I'm going to in fact try to get in touch with him and get him on my shows in both Washington D.C. and L.A. on Pacifica, and see, listen to what he has to say.
And I think that's very important, what we have to deal with here, and that is listening to other people, different perspectives. Look, and I have my own points of view, my own biases as well, but I think the one thing a lot of Americans can universally agree on, there is a massive wave of censorship on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. There is corruption in Washington, D.C. We are not being represented. The number one constituents are, again, corporate donors, because your House representative, your U.S. senator, what they're doing 90% of the time is on the phone calling their donors for more money, so they have enough money to run their campaign, so they get reelected, so they can write legislation to benefit their donors, so they go right back to the phone begging their donors for more money. And let's face it, it's a perfect revolving door where, again, we have unchecked corruption. So at least now we know that there is a growing consensus amongst many Americans that there's something wrong. So as a final note for our viewers and subscribers, in which I'm very glad to have you on, where can people find you online and social media? And also, what more can you do in regards to helping promoting Rage Against the War Machine? I know there's a whole wide range of libertarians, progressives, independents, activists that are speaking there. Where can people follow you online for social media?
At Garland Nixon on Twitter, Garland.Nixon on Instagram, just plain old Garland Nixon on Facebook. Email is easy, garlandn@gmail.com. And my YouTube show, of course, look me up, Rockfin. I love Rockfin. That's my a free speech alternate media site for YouTube for when and if YouTube throws me off. But I'm on Rockfin all the time now. And that's where you can find me online. I'm on there as best I can, saying the things that I believe.
I think that's a fantastic note to end it on. Garland, I do appreciate the time that you made to be on our show, and I want to thank everyone else for tuning in. We will continue on with our normal programming very soon, but one last thing, I'll give you the word,
Sure.
Garland. Is there anything else you wish to share with the people about in regards towards maybe being involved in independent media or getting involved or standing up against censorship? I'll give the final word to you.
Yeah, I just think that everyone should make an effort to support the people online as best they can. To go, if you have social media, if you have whatever Twitter, whatever the case may be, if you have social media accounts, find the stuff that you like, find the shows that you like, find the channels that you like. If Hardlands Media or whoever has a particular show and you think people need to see that, whoever it is, Jimmy Dore, share them on your social media platforms. I think that helps. I know a lot of people who have found out about various social media, about various online shows or particular hosts simply by browsing around online, and somebody shares something. They're like, oh, what is that? Hardlands Media. Oh, they got an interesting show. I think I'll subscribe to their channel. So that's what we can all do out there. Share the whether it's like an article from Consortium News or whatever you can find that you think would be of interest. Your job is to help share it and get the word out.
I think it's a fantastic note to end on. Garland, thank you so much. Hold on. Oops. Let me just get that. I think that's a fantastic note to end it on. Apologies for that, folks. But thank you again so much for taking time out of your day for joining us. And we will be continuing on with the rest of our show. So, Garland, thank you. And everyone, we will be restarting to start our second show. So all the best to you guys. And we'll be going into cue cards now.